Hello, party people, and welcome to another episode of Office Hours. I am on a cruise ship going back from Alaska down to San Francisco. Today's the last full day of our cruise, coming back after a very pretty week and a half of sightseeing up in Alaska and Canada. And I'm waiting for my room service order because it's really nice to sit out here. The weather's gotten really nice. I'm waiting for my room service order, so I thought, well, hey, why don't I start and do some office hours questions here? So the first question is, from Dirty Pages, you mentioned recently how much you swear. What are your favorite swear words and why? And do you have any favorite insults? Well, as you can probably guess, I can't say my favorite swear words out loud in YouTube, so what I would say instead is the abbreviation for my favorite swear word is CS. So as long as you can figure out what that is, because it sounds so just over the top filthy if you say it nasty. But it's really best when you add something else onto it at the end, like Erica and I used to say CS pedestrians whenever we were out driving around and somebody was, crossing the street, and in California we had to wait until they crossed for us to be able to go. We would say those CS pedestrians, because it just sounds so, when in reality, I don't have anything against pedestrians. I think that the street walking rules are totally fine in California. Do I have any favorite roasts? No, I've never been one to be good at roast battles, but I do love watching roast battles. And so it's funny that you mention it because there's a Twitch channel that happens to cross over a couple of my favorite things right now. Dead by Daylight and roast battles. There's this Dead by Daylight streamer named Omar. I can't remember his exact Twitch name, but if you go to Twitch and you search for Dead by Daylight Omar, O-M-A-R, he's funny as all get out, and he'll just start roasting somebody in the street for what they look like. Not all of his episodes are roast battles, but some of them are, which makes them really funny. Next up, SQLCircus.Clown says, what is your go-to default SQL data type for storing date and time data? I don't do a lot of data modeling, so I tend to use what other people that I trust tell me to use. So there's a guy by the name of Randolph West, I believe it is, Randolph West, up in Canada, who's done a big series of blog posts about why you should always use DateTimeOffset. And so I just use DateTimeOffset per his instructions. I think it's DateTime2Offset it is that I use, but I don't get to design that many new tables, so I just go with whatever he recommends. Next up, let's see here. Pixma asks, I have a legacy database that now, look, you can't call it legacy anymore if you're making changes to it. It's your database. It's not a legacy database. That now needs to cater for international and Unicode data. It has hundreds of tables with varchar columns, which will now need to handle Unicode data. Do you have any experience or tips for dealing with this kind of change? I don't do this often, but when a company decides that, okay, we need to move from varchar over to nvarchar, I say, all right, we're going to have to rewrite this table anyway. Whenever we alter that column, we're really going to be doing a rewrite of the clustered index. I said, so let's make a list of what other changes have you wanted to make to the database at this same time. For example, do you need to change your integer ID columns up to big int? If so, let's make a list of everything you want to change. Let's create a new table structure and let's pipe data in from the old table into the new table. Ideally, we do it in a way that doesn't require changes to the apps. For example, switching from varchar to nvarchar doesn't require changes to the apps. It will when you start storing Unicode data in there, but not for the meantime. And it's also a good time to look at things like compression. If you've wanted to do table compression, I would just be really careful about that because it sounds like you also may be getting ready to change the apps to make some other change. Probably not, though. Yeah, you could probably look at compression now. It's a good time. So that you are used to how much logging data will be done, because you're going to be copying tables. It's a big, huge, monstrous change. You can do things like break replication. Start with smaller tables and then gradually work your way up so you get a feel for how long the outages are for each table. Depending on your hardware speeds, this may be a good time to say, temporarily, we're going to move to a much larger or faster VM type or faster storage type temporarily to help us during this transition. And then we'll move back down to a slower one once that transition work is done. Next up, Ramon says, hi Brent, how about a home tour? You mentioned in one session your home theater. I would really appreciate to see that, or your garage and car collection. So, I've always felt weird about that. Like, I feel like it's kind of an MTV Cribs kind of thing, like people showing off, check out my whatever. I'll probably do one when we get our backyard renovation finished, which is supposed to be in about another month or two, depending on how the workers go. Those of you who've been following me on TikTok or Instagram know what a hot mess our backyard renovation has been. I just feel really self-conscious about that as like, hey, I'm a baller kind of thing. And so I don't want to do it in a way that like puts an emphasis on my success, because I do feel I'm decently successful. But I at the same time, I always want to go, oh, let me show you the cool stuff that y'all have been able to help me get. Because at the end of the day, y'all pay my bills, y'all buy me this stuff. And I kind of also want to say thank you for what you've been able to do for me, because I am incredibly thankful for that. I'll be BacH asks, hey Brent, if I want to work with big data, then which type of company should I work for? The kind with big data? No, that's a sarcastic answer, but you'd be really surprised at how many companies have big data in just ways that you wouldn't have expected. I can't name examples here without having to go back and check like my client NDAs. But I'll give you an example. Stack Overflow, because they blogged about this publicly. They track every click you make on their website, every query that gets run by every web page, how long every web page took to render, along with your user information, so that if you called in with a performance complaint or a bug complaint, they could go back through your session data and go see, oh, yep, here's what you were looking at, here were the errors that you got, here's how long it took every query in that web page to render. So that stuff is out there in surprising places. I would say don't think as much about what companies you want to work for. Just go look at the company ads that are out there, like recruiting positions, because everybody's recruiting for this. They don't have the staff internally to handle all of the data problems that they're running into. Next up, Persephone asks, what are the pros and cons of hosting multiple tenants in separate databases in Azure SQL DB? Is plan cache a concern in this scenario? What you want to do is Google for Brent Ozar software as a service design patterns or multi-tenant database design patterns. And I have a whole blog post that goes into detail about this, the pros and cons of putting each client in their own database versus putting multiple clients inside the same database. I break out the pros and cons of each of them, and I tell you which companies are likely to choose which options. And then we'll do one more question. Let's see here. Not that one. Heimdall says, for Entity Framework and SQL Server shops, should the DBA also know Entity Framework in order to troubleshoot and tune queries? Okay, so this is a little tricky. I don't know Entity Framework, and I do it all the time. But what I do is I say, okay, to the developers, here's a list of your top 10 most resource-intensive queries, the ones that we're going to need to fix. Show me in the app code where it is, and let's take a quick look at just to see if we can identify, does this query make sense for this web page? Or did we grab too many rows? Did we grab too many columns? Because Entity Framework will let you pick the columns, it'll let you pick how many rows, things like that. If they can easily make changes to the code on the app side, great. But if not, I'll say, maybe now it's time, assuming that we can't make index changes or SQL Server changes to make the query go faster, and assuming caching isn't an option, which it often is. Also, I'll say, okay, if we've exhausted all of that and you can't fix it in Entity Framework, now is the time to promote that query up into a stored procedure. We're going to put it in a stored procedure where I can do handcrafted changes over the query to make it go quicker. But that is my absolute last resort. That's the last thing I want to do from a performance tuning perspective, because once I take that on, the developers who initially wrote it with Entity Framework, they're not going to be able to edit that in a performant way. They're going to be able to edit the query, but it's not going to be as easy for them as it is with Entity Framework. And I would always rather leave my clients in a place where they can service themselves instead of them having to call me in order to make even the simplest query changes. All right, well, by now my room service order is probably on its way to being fulfilled. It's kind of really cool. Princess, I'm on a Princess cruise line today. Princess has a little app here that shows me what my status of my orders are. Oh, it's been placed, it's been ordered, but it hasn't even started preparing yet. Okay, maybe we can do another question. Princess is really tech forward, which has been really neat for me to see. Next up, we'll do the one that I laughed at. Olga says, excuse me, I do need a drink. Actually, we'll stop it here. Oh, goodness. Salt air out here is hammering my throat. We will stop it here, and I'll see y'all on the next episode of Office Hours. I'm going to go inside and go get a drink. I will leave you with the ocean off of my balcony. Enjoy.